If you're resting on one leg, the sous chef would come in behind you and kick your other leg so you'd fall down and tell you to stand up straight. I had to be firm, but I had to be fair. And if you are going to criticise someone of what they're doing, on the dish or how they're cooking it, you've got to be able to back it up and tell them exactly why. The more you get told that you're not doing it right and someone directing you and pulling you up, the better you get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way, and we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology, we're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com. So ladies and gentlemen, my absolute pleasure to welcome to Unstoppable today, Matt Moran. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
Mate, real pleasure. And thank you also, as we were just talking, you came in and did a cooking class for our K2 elites last week, and they're still raving about it, mate. So thank you very much. But mate, I got to say, when Renee told me that we had the opportunity to interview you today, I don't know if I was excited or slightly intimidated. And I don't say that very often, Matt. I'll be really honest with you. I'm not an easy character to move. But one of the things I've really loved about you and your brand at large is you are quite an assertive guy. You are quite a staunch guy, but you don't come across in an aggressive way. You just have this real presence about this. And my curiosity starts with this. Have you always had this real presence about you? Or is this something that they take chefs away at chef school and, kind of grate the edge down a little bit and make you a little bit harder? Or has this been a part of your personality since as far back?
A lot of people say that about lots of different chefs. Whether you're aware or not, Gordon Ramsay has been my best mate for 28 years. And people say the
Is
same
that
thing
right?
about when he walks in the room, everyone gets intimidated because he's a big man.
Yep.
But underneath that sort of facade is the most gentle, giving, generous man that you've ever met. And I suppose a lot of it came from one being in a kitchen, and kitchens are very very sort of regimented in many ways, and especially a long time ago, and they're very hard places to work. They've always been, high pressure and a real hierarchy system. That's changed a lot. HR changed that, many years ago. But I suppose, being, in the early days of doing reality TV and you've got producers telling you to be harder and tougher. But, I always had this big thing when I was doing that sort of, reality TV, that I had to be firm, but I had to be fair. And if you are going to criticise someone of what they're doing, on the dish or how they're cooking it, you've got to be able to back it up and tell them exactly why. And I've always sort of believed in that. And I suppose it also, when you say that, it's a very interesting point, because I think there's about 12 TV shows I've made, 12 different ones over the years, whether it's here and in the US. 11 of those shows have always been female executive producers. And I obviously like strong women, and I like women that will actually say, Matt, that is shit, do it again. Because where a guy EP might be a little bit intimidated, especially later on.
Fair point.
He wouldn't say it. And like anything, and I'm sure you're the same, is, the more you get told that you're not doing it right and someone directing you and pulling you up, the better you get at it. And, I've always found having strong women around me is probably a real plus, because they're very truthful.
Well, mate, you're literally one of the most celebrated chefs in Australia, but also one of the most celebrated restaurateurs for all the dining establishments and, awards, but also your brand on TV. So you're a very well-known personality. But I'm curious as to where did it all begin in terms of from the kitchen perspective? I know you grew up on a farm, but and I'm going to assume, just by what I've seen and heard, that's going to have some influence. But at what point did you know that you were going to convert from the farm to the kitchen, and where did that all come to pass?
The farm part of it had sort of dissipated way before the cooking part did. So I was born in Tamworth, lived on a farm for 4 or 5 years, And then we left and went to a dairy farm. And we actually left that dairy farm when I was about 8, and we moved
Yeah,
to the
right.
western suburbs. So I actually grew up mainly around Blacktown area. And Dad had bought a little place in Traralgon near Goulburn. And he lost all his dough, and he made a little bit of money and bought this little place. And he used to make me go down there from the age of about 11, I suppose, every weekend and work. So that's where the work ethic sort of came from. And I
Yeah,
love
right.
that. Love
And
that
what
part
type
of
of
it.
work was that?
Oh, we might be, drenching sheep, crutching,
Gotcha.
lamb, or moving sheep around different paddocks, and or there was always sort of physical work, to do on the farm. And we
It was
didn't have a
proper hard
manager.
yakka.
It's hard yakka, yeah. And
Yep.
he'd make us go down there, as teenagers. Because I've got an older brother who's a year older. But then I wasn't that academic at school. I was a little bit ADHD, and sort of, a bit hard to control. And I just didn't want to go on and do my HSC, which a lot of kids didn't back in those days, and they didn't in that
So,
area either.
so were you a little bit rebellious at school?
Oh God, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, mate. I've jumped out the window many times. I'd lock myself at the door, and then, mum used to be at school. God, when I was about 5, 5 and 6, nearly every day, I reckon.
And so how
Yeah.
did ADHD, because I'm someone with ADHD, I talk about it a lot, and we have a lot of people who follow us actually who either have children or have been touched by it in some way. So how does ADHD show up in your life, and how have you learned how to manage it or use it, I should say?
It's not diagnosed, but I remember my father always used to say to me, you've got the concentration span of a retarded flea. I'd be talking about something, I'd go on to something else, and I still do that. I interrupt people all the time and go off on a different tangent, but always been quite active. So I just decided that I wanted to be, I wanted a job, and I'd done home science in year 9 and 10, and I'll tell you, not many kids from Blacktown, and being a big guy, and played footy and sport, did the cooking subjects at high school. But the way I saw it, my mate and I decided that we'd do it. There was him and I and 18 girls, and it meant we had something to eat in the afternoon. So I did home science. I think I came last. I think my final dish from the exam was banana split, which is pretty much a banana cut in half, a little bit of ice cream and chocolate sauce over the top. And I don't even think I bought the chocolate sauce, or made the chocolate sauce. And that was it. So I failed miserably. And then he wanted to be a baker, I think. And I'd done a little bit of butchery growing up with Dad and on the farm. And I had a little bit of work experience in a bakery. And I thought, well, you know what, maybe I'll cross the two of them and try and get a job as a cook. So in year 10, I went to work at Parramatta RSL on weekends.
In the kitchen?
Yeah, in the kitchen, yep. Chef de planche, which is another term for kitchen hand. And I used to be the guy that used to run from the cool room to the head chef when a steak was ordered, because I knew what the different cuts were. And I remember watching him break an egg with one hand once, and he looked at me and he said, in this game you got to be quick. And I thought, God, if I could break an egg one day. And the guy on the char grill had been there for about 4 years, and the guy on the deep fryer had been there for 5 years, and all the guy on the deep fryer wanted to do was be on the char grill. And I just thought, God, if I could go from wash up to the deep fryer one day, I'd be bloody happy. um, and that's what sort of started the whole idea of being a cook. And I didn't really know much about food. We came from a very basic background, as where to us, dinner was a piece of protein and 3 vegetables, and those 3 vegetables were generally boiled. Cauliflower, peas, and pumpkin or potato. So I didn't really know what food was, and the RSL was probably the perfect starting point. Is where the sauces came out of buckets, and most of the seafood came out of the deep fry, out of the freezer. So I kind of felt I was home at the RSL. But when they couldn't give me an apprenticeship after year 10, and my brother was still at school, he was only a year older, so he was a year above me. I just said to Dad, I want to leave. And he said, well, you can't leave school until you get an apprenticeship. So I just went out and just I didn't know what places I was, trying to get an apprenticeship. I just RSL, clubs, restaurants, didn't care. Just wanted a job, and had no real love for food. Apart
But
from
you knew
eating it.
you knew you wanted to be in the kitchen though,
Yeah, well,
or did you at
not
this point?
really. No, I didn't. I really didn't. And
Just wanted a
people,
job.
yeah, I just want a job. And a lot of people always think that because of
Yeah,
who I
yeah.
am, geez, you must have had this incredible upbringing, and your mum was a great cook, and your dad and whatever else. And that's not true. I hadn't had a decent meal until I actually started. Um,
I think that's why a lot of people learn to cook. That's why I learned to fucking cook, because my mum, God bless her soul, she can boil anything to death, but she can't make it good.
I'll stop watching this. So I just started looking for a job, and it was a lot harder back then to get an apprenticeship. Um, I remember going to the Harbour Watch restaurant in just below the Harbour Bridge there. It's now P1, I think. And the guy actually said to me, he's honest. He said, "Look, yeah, great." He goes, "If the first 10 kids don't work out, I'll give you a call." So I just went for job after job after job, and I just no luck at all. I just had no chance. Um, and then I went to a little restaurant on the north side, which I didn't want to go to because I was living in Blacktown. And my father, I told him that I'd made an appointment. He said, "Look, you made the appointment. You're bloody well going." And it was an hour and a half away. So he made me go after school, and I walked in. There's a little French restaurant, and the chef was there, who was the owner. And I saw a piece of paper, and he had to run off to take a phone call or something. And I just saw all these names, and they all had crosses next to them. And I thought, Jesus, he's put crosses next to all these names. I might be in with a chance here. And he came back, and I actually just went for it. I said, "Look, I know I don't have a lot of experience. I've only worked in an RSL, but I've got a really good work ethic." And I just said to him, I said, "If you give me a go, I promise you won't be disappointed." And because I said that, that's the only reason he said to me. So that was like a Tuesday, I think it was, and said to me, "How about you come in and do a 3-day trial? The Thursday, the Friday, and the Saturday nights." And I was still at school. I'd just gone back into year 11, I think. And I went in, and I didn't think that I was that good, but I just could not believe what they were doing with food. Now, this is a fine dining French restaurant on the north side, which must have been probably in the top 5 restaurants in the state. So it was very heavily
Yeah,
French, and
wow.
everyone knew Le Berlin, it was called, back in Roseville, and it's like the mid 80s. And, possibly one of the best chefs I've ever worked with. And he was a great man, Michael. And I did the 3-day trial, and I didn't do anything that special. In fact, I remember one of the days he asked me to strain the game stock, and a game stock to me was you're talking bloody Swahili. I wouldn't have a clue what a game stock was, and all I saw was these bones boiling in a pot, with chicken carcasses and duck carcasses and whatever else was in there. And he asked me to strain it, so I put a colander in the sink and strained it out, and then got the bones and took them back out to him. And he said, "No, no, you throw that in the bin." And I thought to myself, "Shit, if I throw that in the bin, I've got nothing left." And I said, "I don't understand." He said, "Well, where's the liquid?" And I said, "Well, I poured it down the sink." And he said, his head going, and I think he actually thought for a moment is, well, he didn't yell at me, but he kind of was kicking himself because, I was 15 years of age. I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and, I've told that story many, many times. And,
Oh, that's
and now
gold, mate.
I know how many hours went into it before I poured it down the sink. But he said to me on Saturday night, he said, "Did you enjoy it?" And I said, I can't explain what I've seen for the last 3 days." And I got in the car, and I remember Dad saying, "Do you still want to be a chef?" And I said, "Dad, you've got no idea what they do with food. Like, the way that they fan a strawberry, and we whip up egg whites and we make this dessert called a souffle, and it just puffs up." And I was just in absolute,
Wow.
gobs. And he said to me, Michael said, if you want to go to school on Monday." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "And you can tell them that you're leaving." And I was the happiest day of my life. And
Wow.
back then, it was very different hours. We worked. So I went straight from school at La Belle, and we were doing 6 nights a week, so 6 days. And we would start anywhere between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock in the morning, and work right through 6 days. So I was doing, from school, 80, 90 hours a week, and
Wow.
getting paid about $150.
Wow. And how's the
And I
work ethic kicking in at this point? Like, at this point, are you going, "I can handle this," or was this even for you, pushing you?
And it was to me, it was just like,
Heaven.
going to was not really work. I was just learning stuff, and
Yeah,
what I
right.
really liked was that discipline, because in the kitchen, I think there's about 8 chefs at La Belle, and we only did about 40 people a night, and so
Wow.
it's very refined food, and it was pretty tough. I remember sitting at the bench, or sitting at the bench, standing at the bench, and if you were resting on one leg, the sous chef would come behind you and kick your other leg, so you'd fall down and tell you to stand up straight. And that's after you might have been doing 5 days, and you're up to your 80th hour, and you're pretty tired. And Sundays it was a write off. I just go home and sleep. That's my day off. But
And
I
how long did
remember,
you do that for?
mate, I was at La Belle, well, most of my life now. But I was at La Belle. I ended up being head chef when I was 17 and a half.
Yeah,
Um,
wow.
and he went and bought another restaurant, and I was head chef there for a while. And so I spent nearly 5 years there. And I started my own little business on the side of making cakes and tarts, a little deli up the road. And I was
And so
making
that was your first little entrepreneurial venture, was it?
yeah, it was, yeah, yeah. I was making more
And
money making cakes and tarts than what I was
and
than
so
what I
what
was.
spawned that little idea? Like, what was it, just a little side passion, or is this when the commercialization and the entrepreneurial mind started to kick in and
Uh, I, I think a bit of both. I'd done
okay.
a lot of work at the belt, and I was very good at it. And I finished college, and I went up to this little deli. A very famous woman owned it, a girl called Valley Little, who's now passed away, but she was the food editor of Delicious magazine for 12 years. This is prior to her becoming that. And I just walked in, and she knew that I was from La Belle, and I just said, "Hey, look, I know you've just opened. Can I make you some tarts? Refined tarts, and you can slice them up and sell them to your customers." And she was pretty cluey. She said, "Oh, look, just bring me some samples." So I took a bakewell tart, or a winter fruit tart, mandarin, a date tart, maybe a chocolate tart. Came back the next day to see if she wanted me to, if she liked them, and they're all bloody sold. So she made a fortune out of me the first day, and 'cause I never charged. And then in the end, what people were saying, "I've got a dinner party this weekend. Can I order a date tart? Can I order a chocolate tart?" So people would order whole. So I'd get 10, 15, up to 20, 25 tarts a week, and I was making good coin out of it. I was making $500 a week just
Yeah,
selling
wow.
tarts. Back in the mid '80s, that was a lot of
That's
cash.
good
No,
money back in the yeah.
for cash. So I saved quite a bit of money, but I still doing my 80, 90, sometimes 100 hours at La Belle. I'd
Yeah,
get home at
wow.
night, roll pastry till 2 a.m., get up at 6, bake them all off and drop them off on the way.
And so
So
then what came after Labelle? Like, is this when you started to commercialize yourself and become a little bit more entrepreneurial? Did you
I was 19 when I left La Belle.
okay.
A little bit sort of, I don't know whether I was burnt out, but I was a little bit sort of jaded. So I'd worked so bloody hard, lost my teenage years. And I thought that I might go to Europe and work over there. And I gave Michael, I would have been 3 or 4 months notice. And about, probably, half of that had gone by. And out of the blue, I was at La Belle one night, and someone else one afternoon, someone says, "Oh, it's a phone call for you." And I went, "All right." And I said, "Who is it?" And they said, "Oh, Stefano Manfredi." Now, you probably don't know that name, but back in those days, Manfredi had a restaurant called The Restaurant, which was, the talk of the town. Everyone knew, it was the best Italian restaurant. It was a family from northern Italy, and they were just, they were you just, if you ever got offered a job there, you just do it. And I came to the phone. He said, "Oh, hi Matt, you don't know me. I hear you're leaving La Belle. I just want to know whether you'd be interested in coming to work for me." And there was
Wow.
a connection there. Someone I used to go to college with, and they knew that I was there. And I just thought, God, I couldn't never give up that opportunity. So
Wow.
I didn't go to Europe, and I ended up going to work for Stefano and the family. And I was there for a few years, and we won all the big accolades back in those days. And he'd bought a little bistro in Paddington, with another mate. I think there's 4 of them involved in it after Paul Merrin had left, and it wasn't doing that great. I think it's too many owners. And he wanted to sell it in '91, and I told him I wanted to buy it. And he said, "Oh, no, I wouldn't sell it to you, Matt, because then you'd leave Manfredi." And at that point in time, I used to go to this little Japanese restaurant. This is I don't tell this story very often. I used to go to this little Japanese restaurant in Roselle all the time, and I used to love it. And I used to meet my friends there that I used to work with, and all chefs. And you go in there on a Sunday night, and it'd just be full of chefs. And I got chatting to the owner and the chef one day, and he knew that I was working at Manfredi, and he said to me, "So you should come and work for me." And that was not long after I told Steve that I wanted to buy the Paddington Inn off him. And he said, "Well, I'd lose you." And I said, "Well, I might leave anyway." I said, "This Japanese guy's offered me a job, and I'd like to learn a little bit about that. So I'm going to leave anyway." He said, "Oh, who was that?" And I said, "The guy called Tetsuya in Roselle." It wasn't Tetsuya. It was Tetsuya. Um, and then and then I ended up buying Paddington Inn. That was in '91. So that was my first business.
Right. And what kind of drove that? Was it for your a desire to have more freedom? Because since then you've obviously become very commercial. You're involved in a number of different aspects of business.
Yeah,
I'm curious as to the entrepreneurial development side, as to that journey. When did that really start to kick in? Was it about that time when you opened your first restaurant?
100%. There's no question. I opened it with a mate of mine, Peter, who was ended up being my partner for 20 odd years.
Wow.
And he used to run restaurants front of house, and I used to run the kitchen. I just, to be really honest, I just didn't want to be told what to do anymore, and I wanted to have my
Yeah.
own. And wasn't that business minded then, apart from running a kitchen.
Yep.
And we had some tough times in the first few years. I remember the first 3 months we're thinking, "Geez, this is easy. We've got so much money in the bank," but we just hadn't been paying our suppliers properly, and we just didn't know costs. And I think that was a very good lesson for us, because we started
Yeah.
surrounding ourselves with people that knew more than what we did. And obviously over the years you learn from that, and you learn about business, and you learn how hard it is, and how to do the right thing, because a lot of people in our industry weren't. And we're all probably guilty of that. But we changed our ways many, many years ago. Not saying that I'm the perfect one or not, but staff and that were always very, very important to us. And they're the backbone of the place.
Obviously in your game, like, talent is one of those things, and talent in any business is something that can make or break us. Like, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in the kitchen when it comes to leading a team in a high pressure environment?
Oh, look, it's as I said before, I think the big thing is, when you are leading a team, firm but fair, especially in the kitchen,
Yeah.
it comes into play so often. And if you are going to, bollock someone, and I'll go back a few steps. When I opened my first restaurant, for many years, I was an absolute arsehole to work for. I was very tough, and I was very disciplined. And I think that comes from probably being young and having an ego, and also having the thought of failure, and not surviving. But also the big part of it is when you come into my restaurant. It's Matt Moran's restaurant, and if you have
Yeah.
something that's got a slug in the lettuce, or something's not right, you don't blame the apprentice. You go, "Oh, Matt Moran did this."
Yeah.
So having a name on the door was a big thing for me. Everything had to
Mm.
be. Um, and I was tough. There's no question. But I realised very quickly, if you're going to bollock someone, you've got to be able to back it up. And you can't just sit there and do it for no reason. You've got to be able to give
Yeah.
them a reason and say what they did wrong, and let's make it better. And I always used to say to my guys, yes, if I do lose it or whatever, at the end of the night, we're all mates again. And I cherish my staff, because I've had so many that have been with me for so long. I've had staff that have worked with me over the years for 20 years.
Bloody
I've
hell.
had staff that have been with me 15 years, 18 years, 17 years. And to me, that obviously says something. One, I must pay him too much.
No,
Or
no,
two,
no.
we're good to work.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear. Well, obviously, with the connection with Renee, I've heard nothing but good things as well. But so you opened your first establishment in that was in '91.
91. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
And
packed
so,
in. Yeah, with Peter, and then we got out of that. The landlord became a really good friend of mine. His name is Bruce Solomon, and Peter and I went and opened Moran's in Potts Point, and then I opened a little French bistro. So 95 Moran's, 97 Bonfem, which is a little French bistro in Darlinghurst, and then I opened a place and I don't tell many people this story. You're lucky you got out of it. I opened a little place in the city with one of my best friends, Kirk Pangilly, who was in a rock band, In Excess. And
Wow.
we opened a little place in a basement in Pitt Street, and it was an Italian joint. I never put my brand or my name to it. It was just like an investment, and it didn't really work. But at the point in time that I wanted to get out of it, I wanted to do Aria, and I did that by myself without Peter. And it's now a very successful strip joint called Minx, and has been. And I remember when these guys wanted to buy it, like Kirk and I, thinking, Kirk, do we want to own a strip joint? And I think my girlfriend at the time was like, no, and Kirk said, definitely a no.
We're going to turn it into an Italian restaurant.
And then we sold Moran's, Bonfam, and Quattro to then do Aria, which our third partner came in, Bruce. So I've been
Right.
partnered with Bruce now for 21 years. And Peter, I bought Peter out about 5 or 6 years ago.
So Aria is really one of those restaurants that it's a brand name restaurant. It's in most cases a household name in Sydney especially if you live in the CBD area. What was it that birthed the idea for Aria? Like was there a number of factors, or was this just a goal of yours at some point to just do something at that level?
Now, what happened was Bruce, my now partner, when I got out of Paddington Inn, he was the landlord. He helped us get into Moran's, and I could never really understand why the landlord of a place I'm trying to sell was helping me get into another place that he had no connection with. And I remember him saying to me, and he's quite wise, Bruce, and a big influence. He said to me, he goes, Matty, you know what? You helped me once. So I'll help you with this. You never know. You've always done the right thing by me. You know, you paid rent and Paddington was busy. One day I might want your help. So he came to me when I had Moran's and he said, look, there's this incredible building that's being built at Circular Quay, and I want to tender for it. Can I just use your name and you can pull out? And I went, oh yeah, all right, I don't care. And then he came back to me and said, look, can you help me with the kitchen design and whatever else? And he told me that if you know any young chef that wants to come in or whatever, I'll make him a small partner, 5% or whatever, and I'll do it with him. And I looked at him and I said, mate, you want me to do it? He goes, yeah, I do. And I said, we're on the proviso, we're 50-50, and which we always have been. And now we've got 12, 13 places together. And he said, all right. And he said, well, how will you do it? And I said, I'll sell all the other restaurants because I had to get the capital to do it. And no one else really wanted it back in those days because it was a toaster building and it had major opposition to it. In fact, most of the people that actually were opposed to it are now living in it. Radio guys. And so we did a really good deal. We had a massive big fit out. We ended up buying the freehold later on, but we had a big fit out and we had big rent free, and it was the year of the Olympics. So and the millennium. So we opened just before the millennium, 2000, and we had rent free for a year, I think, and we had the Olympics through the middle of it. So it became this phenomenal business, and probably the best thing I ever did. Nari's been now there 21 years, and hopefully another 20 will be there.
Yeah, right. So there's no plans to trade it?
No, mate, no. Ari's it's not the biggest business by any means, but it's the baby.
And obviously
Yeah.
you've done the Chiswick, Banger House, the Opera Bar, North Bondi Fish, Chiswick
Yeah.
Chop House. Out of all the others, like, are there any others that really stand out for you as like one that you either had to work really hard for, or was just, serendipity in the way that it came together and it provided you something you've always wanted that you didn't have at that point?
Opera Bar just started as a very small business, but grew into a massive business.
Mm.
I love the business. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not as passionate about it as what I am. I suppose that farming thing clicked in again because Dad ended up buying a bigger farm, and 20 odd years ago I had a bit of cash and we bought the big place. And there was other family members which I've actually now got rid of. So Dad's got a 30% share, and
When you say got rid of, are they buried on the farm? Does anybody know that they're
I've,
they're gone?
I've leave. No, they're not really on the farm.
So
And
20 years ago, you got into farming again. So it was
yeah,
about, we're talking, so this is 19 to around 2000 now. So what restaurants were you into at that point? And what spurred yourself getting back into farming? Was it the old man being back on the land and you wanting to get involved, or did you actually see the bigger play?
yeah, no, it was more the fact that it might have been, yeah, it might have been around. It would have been around. Yeah, it would have been around 2000, I think. It might have been the year after. I can't remember. But Dad had a littler place with his younger brother, and Dad was not 100% great with his health, and it was just that size farm that he couldn't really employ anyone, and made him a living, but he worked his bollocks off, and I just saw the opportunity to come in. They sell that, and we buy the bigger place, and Dad can have some staff and not work as hard. Um, but always loved it, always loved that side of it. And because I was into restaurants and it really became apparent that restaurants wanted to know and needed to know their producers. Because what used to happen, we just have suppliers that would just bring in stuff and that was it. And over the years, I used to go to the markets by myself um, and you go to the markets, and I suppose it's a good analogy is where you'd go and there'd be a guy there that would have 10 trays of peaches every day, right? And I'd go there and I'd go, look, man, I want your best peaches. And then he realized that, if he just got the best ones out of those 10 and put it into one, he could charge me $5 more, and realized that there was a market for quality. And because I'm the guy that needs the best quality. So, that
Mm.
markets. And then we went one step further because back in the day, I think a lot of restaurateurs were not chefs, is where now they are. And I wanted to know that where that farmer came from, and say to him, look, this is what I want. I want you to grow this for me and grow that for me. Things that you
Yeah,
had.
right.
So the connection from the chef to the producer became a lot closer. And
Yeah,
obviously,
wow.
at that time, I wanted Dad to have fat lamb that I could buy and beef, and now we've got little pigs and I want to do some eggs on there. I'm about to start building little eco huts around the place that people can come and stay on weekends. I think there's a big market for it.
The massive market for it, yeah.
Everyone always says, when can I come to your farm? It's like, well, now you finally can, but you're going to give me $500 a night.
Fair enough too. I
Yeah,
imagine with the quality of food that'll be on site, it'll be, worth a damn sight more.
yeah. Look, I think that's I've been thinking about it. There's another guys they're doing down in Gundagai called I think it's Como, and they're killing it. They've got three little huts and big spa baths and whatever else, looking over this beautiful farm and vista, and I think they're pretty much booked out now for 2 years in advance. And
Wow.
that's not a word of lie. They are
Wow.
absolutely. You can contact them and they'll say next year they've got one day in July, one day in September, one day in October. That's it.
Yeah, right.
Just going nuts. So I actually thought of it before I found those guys, but it's kind of just proven to me that they're
Who is that you
really
mentioned? I'll check it out.
good. Kimo Estate, Kimo Estate, but they go under the name Kimo. He actually corrected me the other day. I said it on radio or something.
Yeah, right.
And they're a big farming property. They've got cows and
What a
sheep and
great idea to
yeah.
integrate the hospitality model. That's brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the next thing on the agenda, and that's what it is for farmers, or our place is cash flow, and that's the thing that we really suffer on the farm is because you sell in bulk at certain times of the year, and it's been unbelievably hard in farming up until COVID-19. It's been fantastic.
Yeah.
Prices are great for cattle. We've had plenty of rain, which is good. We're in the central tableland, so we're quite high rainfall. But you go over the mountain, down out west, and it's still dry, and we're still suffering from a little bit of water. We don't have the water that we should have,
Yeah,
and the
right.
dams are up like they normally are.
So apart from meats, are you also producing the greens and other forms of produce for the restaurants as well?
We're not, but I've got other guys that we work closely with that we get them to grow stuff for us, and that connection with the producer and the chef, it's so important. Um,
It
it's
it
not-
is, but it also makes sense commercially, like, to have that supply chain, And again, not just commercially, because when you look at it commercially, it's a lot more sustainable when you're not splitting profit across, so many different players in the market. You're
And
actually
that's
creating, yeah,
yeah, that's the thing with our industries where it is hard to make a margin,
yeah.
and you've got to start being creative on how you can actually make those percentages up. And if that's out by cutting out the wholesaler in the middle,
Mm.
it's for us, it's better for the farmer too. And I think that a lot more of that will happen over the years. There's no question. I think Neil is doing the same thing. He buys all
Mm.
his milk now through David Blackmore, who Cape Grim, and not going through the wholesale. So I think that'll happen more.
And so now we enter the COVID era, and it feels like it's affected, not just
Mm,
economies, it's affected lifestyles, it's affected dynamics within even relationships. We're going to see COVID babies coming out, and some
yeah,
COVID divorces as well, apparently. But I spoke to Neil a couple of weeks ago from Rockpool about how they were impacted and how they innovated, pivoted, and have transitioned and also attempted to transition some of their success and failures. I'm curious with your experience, and again, obviously you've got your finger on the pulse across the industry. What's been happening with you? What in the last 3 months since COVID has hit, and what was actually the scenario? Like, when did it come on your radar, and how did it roll out in your world?
yeah. Look, when it's I came back from the States at the end of January, and I think I'd heard a couple of cases here and there. Um, and then by February, you could hear that it was happening more and more. I remember we were having a board meeting. It must have been early March, and we were looking at our figures across the group for the year, rolling into it, and going, well, you know what, this if this thing happens in Australia, what would our model look like if we lost 10% of revenue? And we looked at it and went, wow, that's a big difference. Our margin, sits around 10% profit. And it's not just you wipe off 10% revenue and it becomes 9% profit. It's that's the cream bit.
It doesn't work that
And then
way.
we had the model of looking at, God, what would happen if it was 20% margin? And it was just absolutely devastating. Like, it was just our business was losing money. And then, we just put the model up and said, what would happen if we had 50%? And we all just laughed and thought, well, that's never going to happen. And it was 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks later, we were closed. We had nothing.
Mm.
No revenue whatsoever, not one cent of revenue. But in that 3 week period of when it started to close down, it's not like um, a small tinny runabout that you can just turn it around and change
Mm.
in a direction. It's like a big boat, and to turn a big boat around, it can't just turn everything off. So the losses in those 3 weeks were absolutely unbelievable. So we were basically, begging the government to shut us down completely, because that meant, rents and government rents and whatever else would just cease to exist,
Yep.
because we were just burning money so much, because you've got all your staff, but then you've got all these restrictions. So, going from Aria, for instance, just say 1,500 customers a week. When we got restrictions, we're down to 750, and then people didn't want to go out. So you're doing 500 covers, but you've still got your whole staff. So I
Mm.
think our wages the last week, our wages at a couple of venues were over 100% of revenue.
Wow.
And then you've also got, and when everyone thinks the world's going to blow up, what do you do with your staff? And between Bruce and I, there's about 1,600 staff.
Oof.
And how do we look after those people? How do we make sure that they get their entitlements, their holiday pay? And some of them have been with us for years, and we jumped really quickly, and we decided that we would put in our own money and make sure that every staff member got their entitlements, which probably was a bit too quick because JobKeeper came out not long after that. But
Yep.
we paid out everyone's stuff. Now, I don't know. I just had this theory that if the world goes to shit, no one can ever say that Matt Moran didn't pay me. Um, so it was really important to me. So we
Yeah,
did
I
that,
get it. I can see that.
and it obviously a lot of them were very grateful because they had something to live on straight away. But we did have 350 visa staff that weren't eligible,
Mm.
which really hurt. We paid all their entitlements at least, so they had some money. I know some people probably didn't do that, and a lot of people went home, and
Mm.
that's our workforce. So now slowly reopening, we're trying to get as many of them back as we possibly can, so they've got some sort of income. But yeah, it was absolutely devastating. Like I just thought, how the hell are we going to get through this? And what's it look like on the other side? And I think the other side's probably just as scary, reopening. Um, I think if you don't have capital now and you're going to reopen in September, it's going to be really tough for it.
Yeah, I agree
Um,
with that. Yeah.
we're sort of lucky we were in a pretty good position um, compared to some people. And we're just sort of testing the waters by slowly opening and making everything a little bit tighter and a little bit more limited. So we don't have
Mm.
in the kitchen we don't have a workhouse, so the menus are a bit smaller, and there's not as many in the kitchen, and we're just slowly opening up, and hopefully, I don't think anything will come back to normal, and I think restaurants won't ever be the same, but they'll probably be ran a little bit better, and things that we never even thought about, that we never used to do, that we used to suffer from, like at Aria we would have 15 tables that wouldn't turn up on a Saturday night because they could. They didn't pay any deposits. It's like making an airline booking. If you don't turn up, you lose your money. No, the restaurants never took deposits, for unless there was a group of people, and it was just insane because I suppose we were all fighting against each other, and no one really wanted to make the first call. Is where what's happened now is every restaurant is taking a part in
Mm.
charge of it, and I think in the 4 weeks that we've been reopened, we've only had one person not show up. So that's changed everything because people would
I,
go take 3 bookings on a Saturday night and go,
yeah.
"I'm sorry, let's go there," and not even cancel the other two.
Yeah.
And I think people now, because it's been publicised, understand that the restaurants and how they operate, and if we had 10% of people not show at Aria on a Saturday night, that's more than our profit gone.
Yeah. That's
So,
yeah.
so it
So
has been.
So speaking to Neil and obviously a lot of other business owners as well, like COVID's had an interesting effect. There's clearly been a mass level of devastation in a number of industries. Some industries have gone on to thrive and got even stronger, but
Yeah,
some industries are in a bit of a hibernation, like yours, the hospitality, the restaurant space, and even in this space, there's a lot of pivoting and a lot of adaptation and a lot of innovation that's taking place. On the balance of the equation, what has been some of the real positives that has come out of this situation from a business perspective, a restaurant perspective, or even just a self perspective? What's been the upside of this for you guys?
I suppose for me, it really makes you think what you need in life and what you want. And I'm not getting any younger. And if you asked me 5 years ago, I'd probably say that I want 50 restaurants, and have an empire and whatever else. But I think my whole mindset has changed, and I think I want to diverse a little bit more than what I have. Hence the farming and little sort of accommodation and stuff like that, and not be just 100% solely reliant on hospitality. Um, you know, the TV thing, I'm not really sort of slated to do much. I just signed a massive deal last year in the US for 4 years to do a big show, and I went over to Mexico and made the first episode, and it was more of a reality, but traveling. And our next port was Italy, Spain, Portugal, and France,
Oh
I think,
fuck.
and Greece. So that's not happening. I think what it has made, we're going to lose a lot of restaurants. There's no question.
Mm.
I'm surprised if 50, 60% actually make it through to next year. So the competition will be less. But I think what we really have to do is stand together as an industry and try and change the dynamics and try and change the margins. If people want to eat out and eat good food, they're going to have to somehow pay for it, because it's just too slim for us to survive now. And I think we'll be smarter at what we do. And I think labour is a massive issue for us. So we'll have to change the ways that we do things, so it's not, and somehow try and find more margin. Now, I think the path that we were on prior to this was a path that probably was going to end somewhere along the line, because I don't think they're sustainable. Fighting against each other and undercutting and whatever else to get a share. And there's probably too many restaurants. And I think that's all over the world. Anyone can open a restaurant. You don't need to be qualified. So, cafes and whatever else. So I think it's a really good reset for the industry, and really good reset for the individuals to actually make it better and right. And I think the
So,
industry needs to be there.
so what is sustain? Like I've noticed it's something that you're quite passionate about in the farming area is the sustainability factor, or the sustainability aspect. What does
Yeah.
that mean, or what does that look like from your perspective? Obviously, having a slightly different, view than the average punter, or even the average farmer. Maybe I'm not sure.
Look, you just see people's eating habits, and how they've changed over the years. 20 years ago, you came into a restaurant and you were a vegetarian. You got a plate of broccoli. And now that's all changed. Now everyone's got to have that options, and just by seeing the quantities of meat, fish, chicken, and whatever people are eating, it's definitely less of it. And is where I think 20 years ago, the plate, the big portion, the plate was protein and vegetables. 80%, 20%, and where now it's probably 50-50. But you've got a lot more vegetarian options too. So I think we'll be eating less meat, even though I'm a farmer, which I think is a great thing, for the environment and whatever else. I think we'll just be eating better quality, and that's where I want to make sure that it is, the best of the best. And sustainable is where we're not fertilizing, and we shouldn't be. We should be becoming more organic and biodynamic, which is something hard when you've got a father who's been doing it for 75 years and not wanting to change his ways. But that's slowly going to take place, which is a good thing. And we need as a country to be more sustainable. We don't need to rely on everybody else, and I think this is a great opportunity. And
I agree.
that's where we should be going.
Mm.
I was guilty of it, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, of buying, whatever I could from wherever I could in the world. And you tend to lose, the romance of it. And I'll give you some examples. Is where, I remember, asparagus on a menu. We'd be using it, and we'd be using Australian asparagus, which was great. And then all of a sudden, go out of season. And well, fine, just buy it from Peru or Mexico. I don't care. Just have asparagus on the menu. And then you just see it all year round. And you kind of lose that beautiful romance of what food really is, and that excitement to see it. So I banned all that stuff. I said, you can't buy stuff from overseas from now on. When asparagus is in season, we're going to use it, and we're going to use it as much as we possibly can, because it's local, it's cheaper, and it's better quality, because when a mango comes into season, the first mango is expensive, and then in the middle of this, and it's bloody average, the mango season in the middle, they're really cheap because they're abundant and they're beautiful, and at the end of the season they get expensive again. So as a commercial thinking, you want to be using things that are abundant and in season. So, and then it just sort of started to click. When you see asparagus for the first time coming in from Australia, you go, oh God, it's great, love it. You use it, and then it goes out of season, and then you look forward to getting it back again from Peru or Mexico, and then it just, to me, the romance comes into that, is where you get excited when you see something for the first time, and you go, right, now I want to use it on the menu, but also makes your menu much more seasonal, which just makes sense commercially. So I embrace that seasonality and having things that you don't see for a while, and when you do see them, I get excited. I get excited when I see the first cherries or my first white peach. And I used to say to people, mangoes are in season. It's my favourite fruit. And I go, all right. And then a month later, I'd see my first red peach and go, oh, it's my favourite fruit. But you said mangoes. And then figs would come in and go, oh, they're my favourite fruit. And I used to just get so excited. I used to think in my head that was my favourite fruit.
Well, mate, Listen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate, not just your time today, but also the other night for our cooking class for our K2s. But before we go, mate, obviously you've got a lot going on with COVID. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty in the future. But I am curious about like what's next for you. Like, are there any bigger projects or newer projects on the horizon that you're looking forward to getting out there?
Look, to be honest, you know, the most important thing at the moment is it's getting back to normality and getting restaurants open and making sure everyone's all right and they're sustainable and they're moving forward. Um, I've always got a million things that I want to do, and you know, there are things in the pipeline. But you know, I'm just
What's
going.
one thing in the pipeline right now you're super excited about that not very many people know about that you'd be willing to like throw a breadcrumb to?
You know, the whole thing with you know the farming and having little eco things, they're going to happen. You know, I'd like to get a bit more of a hub in Sydney, is where I want a bit more commercial kitchen, not just at home. You know, where I cooked for you guys the other night, but to have a commercial kitchen is where I can set up as a bit of a studio and do multiple things out of it. Whether it's you know, if I ever need to go and do something now, I go to the restaurants and use their kitchen. I'd rather have my own and maybe put a little bar or something in it and you know, have my offices upstairs, something like
So do you see broadcast becoming a part of your strategy? Obviously, it's becoming increasingly more. Like,
that.
and when I say broadcast, clearly you've been involved in broadcast for a long time,
Yeah,
but now you're
yeah.
doing your own broadcasts.
Yeah, well, look, I will. I'll start to do more and more, and you know, and putting videos online and however we do that content, which I've always wanted to do. As for TV, you know, I like TV, but it's not my main thing. It never has been. It's always been a byproduct, which has always worked in my advantage because if I don't want to do it, I just say no. And you know, a lot of people just want to be on TVs, but I never had that sort of sense of I just want to be on TV. So it's got to be the right thing. So you know, if that happens, if the US thing comes back, it'll come back. Bake Off might come back with Maggie Beer. I'm not sure. You know, there's always opportunities, I suppose, and I think they'll continue.
Fantastic. Well, mate, appreciate your time today. Can't wait to actually meet you in the flesh and try some of that incredible lamb. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Moran, legend, mate. Thank you. This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business. There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you get to see all of these interviews in the flesh. Share this podcast with your friends and drop me a review on iTunes. I would love to hear what you guys think and also let you know that your comments help make sure that we keep producing killer content just like this. And if you'd like to stay up to date with all of my movements, upcoming podcasts, events, and much more, please jump onto the website kerwinray.com and also check us out on all social media on the handle @KerwinRay. Thanks for joining us.